If you want to learn more about espionage and intelligence tradecraft, this is a book that will teach you a ton. It's called The Double Cross System, and it's truly remarkable. So, a little bit about the book, because it helps explain why it's so phenomenal, is it was published in 1972, but it was written in 1945. And it wasn't written as a book, it was written as a report. The war was over, and the guy who wrote it, he was instructed, like, write this report on this set of activities that occurred during the war called the double cross system. The double cross system refers to British intelligence controlling all of the German agents who operated in Britain during the war. It's amazing. What that means is that every spy that Germany thought they had operating in Britain during World War II was actually under the control of British intelligence. It's an incredible, incredible story. So, how it worked was at the beginning of the war, due to some fortuitous circumstances, the British identified and were able to convert the agents already working in England into double agents. And they got them. And then through that control, they were able to gain leverage and knowledge of all the other agents that Germany sent in to do espionage work. And they were able to intercept them right away. Some of them they turned into double agents. Some of them they executed. Some of them they jailed. Some of them they turned them right back around. But throughout the course of the war, off and on, they got about 120 agents that they turned into double agents. And through that, they were able to control an insane amount of information that was flowing back and really genuinely positively impact the war effort for the Allies. So there's a lot of really, it's really lucky. So the guy who wrote it, J.C. Masterman, he was the head of this group called the 20 Committee. So the agents were run by case officers in MI5. Makes sense, right? MI5, domestic intelligence, that's what they do. But it was recognized right away that this really had to be a group effort. So no puppet masters, no silos. MI6 was involved, branches of the military, the diplomats, a whole variety of people, because this was a big program and it could do a lot, right? They could be wielded for a lot of influence. But as is always the case with espionage, like, when do you blow it? When do you blow an agent? When do you blow a cover story? In order for what gain? Are the gains worth it, right? And this book is so interesting because it really gives us amazing insight into just how difficult espionage work is. So for this program, the double cross system, like, you can't have everybody running off as individuals, right? Doing all their individual little plans, because it wouldn't work. They had to keep track of what information and who was sharing it to the Germans and which parts of it. Wasn't like the Germans as this monolithic whole, right? Like, which Abwehr agents were getting, or officers were getting, what information from what double agent operating in Britain. And they had to, remember, like, who would plant what. So in the beginning of the book, he's got these 12 principles for how to run a good double agent. And I'm not going to list them because they don't lend themselves to just kind of these 12 fancy bullet points. They're quite extensive. But things like the agent has to be living the kind of life that they're supposed to be living. They have to be able to share information that they would reasonably get. So a couple of the agents were Norwegians who were like Navy people, or like worked on boats. And so they're not going to get information about what's happening in diplomatic circles, right? So, the agents have to share information that's reasonable for them. And they have to, as much as possible, be living the kind of life they're supposed to be living, which for some of them, like a lot of these agents that the Germans sent over, and sometimes they'd like drop them by U-boat, they'd parachute them in, they'd come in through legitimate business reasons. They're all these different paths. And so if you were sent in to do business, like, let's say you own some sort of, machine parts company, well, you had to keep doing that business. If you worked on farms, like, you had to keep working on farms. So it required this amazing coordination effort, all these details, this patience required to sort out all the details of which agent was going to share what when. Agents come and go, right? They're not directly employed by German intelligence agencies. They are agents. They have other lives, and they're ostensibly working for the Germans. And now they're double agents working for the English, but they still have to maintain that whole other life. And there's so many things that come out in this book that I just felt like so illuminating. So one of the really interesting parts is the questionnaires that the Germans would send over or transmit, depending on how they contacted their agents, with all the questions they wanted to know. So it wasn't like, okay, agent, go over, we're going to land you in the UK, do the best you can. Just find out whatever. That isn't how it worked. Depending on who the agent was and what they would probably have access to, they were given a list of, these are the things we want to know. Then we want to know about the weather, or we want to know, where Lise Meitner lives, which that was pretty cool. We want to know, what kind of buildups are on the coast in terms of military installations. We want to know about the planes. We want to know how they maintain them. And one of the things so it was MI5, like I said, who was running the agents, but, worked with MI6, and there was all this deconfliction happening. And the case officers would, as a group, work together, report to this 20 committee, which was, again, headed by the guy who wrote this report. And then they would actually also report up into this thing called W board. So there were lots of, you tried to keep it as small as possible, but there were lots of people involved to make sure that the agents were used in the right way. Now, he talks a lot about the difference between working in espionage in peacetime versus wartime. So one thing that was very interesting about how they approach their operations with these double agents and the double cross system was they were working towards this goal called one day Britain and allies would go invade. Right? Like, this wasn't a maintenance thing. This wasn't a peacetime. We're just going to kind of keep abreast of what's happening. They knew they were working towards that goal, but they didn't know when that day was going to come. They didn't know when would be the right time to possibly blow the entire system in service of that invasion goal, right? So figuring that out and all that balance, like, it was super fascinating. He talks a lot about the patience required and the details required, that it's really not a very glamorous job, right? He talks about how agents come and go, and sometimes they do have to be sacrificed. He talks about how hard it is to trade off the short-term wins with the idea of this uncertain long-term payout in the future. Anyway, it is a fantastic book. And like what I said, makes it so unbelievable is that because it was written as a report, we get to glimpse this kind of almost as it was happening. When I did some background research on the book, there are other books that have been written about the double cross system. I'm assuming using this as like one of the primary resources. And I'm sure a lot of those books are good. I saw that Ben McIntyre has one, which I'm going to go check out. But those are all through the lens of, the time that's passed, right? With the benefit of the hindsight of the last 80 years and all the other records that have become declassified and all the things that we now know. And to read this book as a report right after the war that, they didn't publish for almost 30 years. So it's not like the guy who wrote it knew it was going to be published. To just say, okay, here's my honest evaluation of the double cross system. This is what we learned. This is what worked. This is what didn't. This is how you keep agents going. They require constant psychological assessment and support and financial support. And, a case officer can only handle a couple at a time, and they have to live in each other's pockets. And it just gives you so much insight into the amount of work and resources that are required to really do good espionage work. And, at what point do you say, okay, we're going to cut it off. We're just going to get rid of all the agents. We just don't want any more spies in our country, versus how can we use the spies that are here in order to further our own goals and our own motives. So I highly recommend it. It was really phenomenal. I'll be doing a couple more videos in the next few weeks about more specific content from the book that just kind of blew my mind. If you've read it, I'd love to hear about it. If you have any questions or comments or know anything more about the double cross system and want to share, I'd be super interested in hearing about it. Otherwise, as usual, I hope everyone's doing fantastic.